Hello my friends, Dr. Amos here, Intermediate Microeconomics. We have to cover quasi-rents. And today we'll just talk about applications because the best way to understand quasi-rent is to think through the applications and how it's actually being presented. So let's talk about the definition. We'll start with definition and then we can move on. The definition of quasi-rents is it's a payment factor with no opportunity cost. It's a payment for any factor with no opportunity cost. So it could be a revenue, it could be a profit, it could be any type of payment as long as it has no opportunity cost. So let's go through some examples, and that would be helpful to illustrate quasi-rents. If you ever travel to Disney World or Disneyland, you may recall that both places charge fees at the entrance. So before you go into the park, you have to pay entrance fee. And then once you are inside, you can use the rides, those fun rides, as many times as you want, unlimited. Now, let's suppose that there is a study that illustrating with a precise measurement that if Disney World and or Disneyland would charge per ride instead of entrance fee, they can raise more money. That will contribute to their profit. So if that's the case, then why are they not charging per ride? Why they are interested in entrance fee proposition in spite of the fact that fees per ride could raise more revenue? One possible explanation is quasi-rent. Basically, when people pay entrance fee, their behavioral choices as it comes to consumption of rides is very different when you compare their paying fees per ride. And here's how it is different. Number one, every time or any time you go to Disney World, you will find long lines. Yes, you can take unlimited fun rides, but it's subject to the constraint of how long those lines are. So in some cases, you can wait for an hour or more to take a ride. So what happens when Disney World would choose to charge per ride? Couple of things. Number one, they can charge per ride high enough price that would eliminate long lines. So that should be obvious. That's number one. Number two, people would be careful in selecting the rides and be very intentional because they have to pay for each one of them separately, as opposed to when they pay as a wholesale package. And with the wholesale package, they want to get as many rides as possible and have a very diversified experience. When they instead, if they pay per ride, it's not going to be the same approach. They would be carefully selecting which rides to take and maybe even go as far as to find out information prior to taking the ride whether the money is worth it. But that's not all. That's not the end of the story. The entrance fee for Disney World does something very remarkable. It actually provides the barrier. It does not allow people to go in unless they're willing to take the rides. In other words, if you were to eliminate the entrance fee, then all kind of people would go to Disney World, including those who are not interested in rides, but they just want to be among the big crowd, and they may bring some alcohol. Overall, entrance fee is mitigating this risk, keeping people who are not interested in rides out. Otherwise, it will increase the crime rate. And since Disney World environment is for children, you never mix crime and children environment. Because if parents find out that the crime rate is substantially high, then they will refuse to take their kids to Disney World altogether. So in this case, Disney World is very intentional and rational when choosing to charge entrance fee, because it serves as a contribution towards mitigating the crime rate. And in fact, it lowers the crime rate by default by keeping people who are not interested in rides out. Now, where does quasi-rents discussion come into play? The quasi-rents discussion come into play with the following. You think about parents taking children to Disney World. They buy the airplane ticket, they reserve the hotel, and maybe some other expenses. So as they arrive to the entrance of Disney World, they essentially would be willing to pay higher price than currently Disney World is charging. But how high? That's the question. And that's where the quasi-rents come into play. Disney World, in theory, can raise the entrance fee as high as the factor payment that has no opportunity cost. Once you buy the airline ticket and you arrive to Disney World, it commits you to return. And you cannot do anything about the expense that incurred for the airline ticket. So at the very least, people would be willing to pay as much as they incurred expenses for other factors that have no opportunity cost, like the airfare in this case. So that's your example of quasi-rents. Let me give you another example. If you were to go to Niagara Falls or any well-known tourist destination, you are likely to find that the similar restaurants, even some fast food chain, would charge a premium at those places as opposed to some regular stores at a typical neighborhood. And the reason is the same, quasi-rents. Once people travel to see Niagara Falls, they will incur the expense that has no opportunity cost. It makes a commitment for them to return, and there is nothing they can do to leverage this expense. It's incurred, it's a sunk cost, it has no opportunity cost to change that. And that factor alone drives people to be willing to pay the premium for the meal at the restaurant or for the hotel room that would cost much less otherwise at a regular neighborhood. So sometimes my students would ask me a question of that nature. once they get employed and they have to relocate, whether overseas or to a different state, they ask me whether they should buy the housing or whether they should buy the car and incur some quasi-rent type of expense. And I always respond to them, wait. Because once you incur the quasi-rent, such as buying the house with your job relocation, and your company finds out that you incur the quasi-rent with the home purchase, they can cut your salary by 10% and you will do nothing about it. Because your quasi-rents will be a determinant factor that will allow you to tolerate those losses. So I want you to understand that the quasi-rents is real and driving behavioral choices in our everyday life. Finally, what I want to discuss with you is one more example that will help you to expand your thinking in relationship to quasi-rents. And we can think through the question such as why in the United States Americans are gaining weight with respect to own past and with respect to other countries. That's an interesting question. And if you were to think through, in 1900s, you will find out that it took 20 people to feed 100. Today it takes only 2. So technology is present and it could play some role, but I think that you can dig deeper and think about intertemporal choice. Think about that being overweight is historically inefficient from economic perspective, because being overweight, as we all aware, leads to a number of chronic diseases and including shorter life expectancy. So if that's the case, and we are all so well informed that being overweight leads to shorter life expectancy and poor quality of life, why do we choose to be overweight? It's a very cool question to answer, because it seems on the surface that we are behaving irrationally by choosing something that is harmful in this particular case. One explanation that I can offer to think through this issue, and I know that someone can suggest that because of the wealthy people actually eat more healthy and they more exercise and they want to live longer, they want to have a high quality of life, because for them to die it takes it's much more than for their poor counterpart. For a wealthy person to die, it takes much more to give up than for somebody who is poor. So you will find wealthy people actually trying to adhere to a healthier lifestyle, and they may buy expensive food and they go to the gym and they take care of themselves. So the wealth in this case may not serve us well. However, if you were to think about intertemporal choice, and intertemporal choice means the trade-off between present versus future, you are essentially thinking through this question in the following parameters. You are eating unhealthy today and experience severe detrimental outcomes in the future. So you are willing to observe a benefit of taste, or fun or whatever it is today in exchange for some inflated cost as the consequence of such in the future. That's what intertemporal choice is. Okay? So we really want to think through those issues in the following way. Because there is intertemporal choice, it implies that the answer should eliminate this intertemporal trade-off. What do I mean? Specifically, there is something that in existence that allows those detrimental and harmful impact associated cost to be discounted in the future. So it's becoming less expensive to eat unhealthy today in pursuit of taste, in pursuit of MSG that allows you to be more addicted with your bud tastes under your tongue, whatever it is. But there is a cost that is involved today versus the future. So I think one of the things that we can suggest is drugs, medicine. Medicine indeed can reduce eating unhealthy food today in relationship to the future consequences associated with undesirable cost. In fact, medicine, including the surgery, discount future cost to be lower, so today you can enjoy consumption of unhealthy choices. So, and of course, surgery and drugs that help you to address things like diabetes in the future and other chronic debilitating diseases is able to discount the cost. But I am afraid that most of us underinformed that there are some additional costs, such as side effects of medication or the risk that comes with every single surgery. All those things, I'm afraid, are not accounted for when those decisions are made. And that presents the room for residuals, which means that, yes, people in the United States choose unhealthy behavioral choices today in spite of detrimental and harmful cost in the future that could be discounted by drugs and medicine. There are still lack of information that this discounting factor may appear bigger than it is, or it's overstated. And this is where education comes into play. And every time you educate the public in relationship to healthy choices, you are in essence reducing the residuals, and thus you are helping people to make better intertemporal choices. All right, and that would be good for today, my friends. I appreciate your time, and we'll see you soon.